why is there this demand for a smartwatch? Why are so many people in tech interested in building a smartwatch? Next, we'll talk about how Apple fits into that puzzle, what they've done, and what they've built here with the new Apple Watch. Next, we'll talk about the nitty-gritty of development and the API that Apple has available for us. Next, I'm going to talk about my own observations. Now that I've had this watch for about a couple of weeks, what have I seen with the Apple Watch? What are the positives and the negatives that I've seen? And where is there room for improvement? Lastly, we'll talk about opportunities. Where do I see opportunities that the Apple Watch presents to those of us in the business and tech community? As far as what can we do with this new device out there? So I'm sure we've seen smartwatches, science fiction, and all sorts of different media in the last so many years. And I think when you go up to the average person and you go up to them and say, would you be interested in a smartwatch? I think most people would scoff at that, especially when you start telling them how much these things cost, right? And the thing to think about is, let's go back to like 1999, right? Many of us, I'd say a majority, but not everyone had a cell phone. But who in their right mind thought it would be necessary to have a phone that you can surf on the internet, or I don't think Facebook existed back then, but being able to look up all sorts of information on a phone, as opposed to just like doing a simple phone call. Isn't that all you really need? Now we're in 2015, and I think the majority of us have a smartphone. It could be Android, it could be Microsoft, it could be an Apple phone, iPhone, but we all have a smartphone now. And I think that's something you need to think about when you think about the Apple Watch or any of these smartwatches. Sure, it's not something that you need, but I would say like 5 to 10 years, we're all going to look back and think about how our lives used to be so quaint without smartwatches. And so, just as I think something like an iPhone at first didn't really have that momentum going, and then it got really big, I think we're going to see that with the devices like smartwatches and the Apple Watch. So, the Apple Watch was first announced on April 9th, and pre-ordering began on April 10th, with deliveries beginning on April 24th. And there's still a lot on back order, but people are starting to get them slowly but surely. And what we've seen is there's definitely a demand out there for the Apple Watch. So here's some sales figures just to give you an idea. These are the first launches of these devices. So when the iPhone was first launched, it only got 250,000 in sales, unit sales on that first day. With the iPad, they got up to about 500,000. And on the first day of pre-orders for the Apple Watch, the estimates are somewhere between 1 to 3 million. Roughly about 2.3 million units sold on that first day. So there's definitely a demand there for an Apple Watch. Let's get into the nitty-gritty and some tech specs here, probably the boring part, I apologize. So the Apple Watch comes with an Apple S1 processor. It has 8 gigs of storage. To give you an idea, so if you bought a newer iPhone nowadays, typically they come with, the smallest come with 16 gigs, so that's about half of that is 8 gigs. That's how much storage you have in the Apple Watch. The watch comes in 2 sizes, commonly called a men's and a women's size, at 44, 42 millimeters and 38 millimeters. The battery life I found on this device is actually really good. They say about 18 hours, and I'd say that's about right. Usually by the end of the day, I end up with around 50 to 25% of battery left. We've talked a little bit about NFC, so if you're not familiar, if you have a newer iPhone, you probably, like an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus, you've probably heard of Apple Pay. And that gives you the ability to pay with your credit card at participating stores with your phone. So you can just use your phone, swipe at a kiosk, and it'll pay for your device, or pay for your purchase at that store. So with the Apple Watch, you can do that as well. It uses NFC in order to do Apple Pay. Secondly is Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So in order to use the Apple Watch, you need an iPhone 5 or newer. And so in order to communicate between the phone and the watch, it uses Bluetooth, and if it's at a larger distance and it can share the same Wi-Fi network, it will then use Wi-Fi to then connect the phone to to the watch. Watch also comes with pretty common user interface, multi-touch, microphone, side button, but also has a couple of newer features. So if you have a watch, you'll notice there's a little thing typically on a watch called a crown that's used for setting times or alarms, things like that. What Apple did is they used that same device or interface in the Apple Watch. They call it a digital crown. And what they've done is they've used that for things like scrolling, zooming, the kind of features that you typically would do on a larger device with 2 fingers. Now you could do it on the Apple Watch using the digital crown. There's also kind of the common motion detection stuff, an accelerometer, a gyroscope. There is the heart rate sensor, so as long as you don't have tattoos on your wrist, you should be okay there. And lastly, the barometer, which is detects moisture and humidity, and then based on that, it detects your altitude. So it can, it's kind of used for like standing up or any sort of altitude calculations for any sort of activity. All right, let's talk a little bit about models. So there's 3 models with the Apple Watch. The first is the Apple Watch Sport. That's priced at between $350 and $400, depending if you get the men's or the women's. The case, and then a case is usually the big pricing factor in these, is made out of aluminum, and it comes with a plastic, we call it fluoroelastomer plastic sport band, and that comes in a variety of colors. Next is the Apple Watch. It's just called the Apple Watch. And that is priced at between $550 and $1,100. That case is stainless steel, and it can either come with the fluoroelastomer plastic band, or you can add a leather band or a stainless steel band, and depending on which band you pick, and of course the size of the watch that you get, you're going to have, that's what determines the price. And now, for those of us with some extra spare change willing to spend, we have the wonderful Apple Watch edition, priced at between 10 and 17 grand. Why on earth? Well, it's made out of 18 karat gold, that's why. So that alone bumps up the price quite considerably. You can actually get the gold in yellow or a red tinted rose color, so in case you're interested. And then the price differentiator then is going to be the band, whether you go with the fluoroelastomer sport band plastic or whether you go with the leather with the classic or modern buckle. But that is priced at between 10 and 17 grand. So you might be asking, what are the sales figures on that, right? Well, surprisingly enough, 85% of people are buying the Apple Watch Sport on the first day pre-orders. 15% are buying the Apple Watch, and less than 1% buy the Apple Watch Edition. But I bet that makes a big, I bet they make a decent sales margin on that, so I can't exactly feel sympathy for them. If you look at the colors on the Apple Watch Sport, I thought this was interesting. By far, people are going with more bland colors, so to speak, the less bright colors. 64% of people are going with the space gray, and almost a quarter of people are going for the white. And when it comes to actual like brighter colors, the blue, pink, and green, that makes up less than 15% of the people are even purchasing those color bands for their Apple Watch Sport. So let's talk a little bit about development and API. How do you go about building something for the Apple Watch? Well, first of all, let's talk about how Apple Watch apps are delivered. In order to deliver an Apple Watch app, you would have to build an app for the phone. And on that phone, or on that app, is what's called an app extension. App extensions have actually been around for quite some time. So with, you could do stuff like Today, notifications, custom keyboards, things like that are typically done as app extensions. And what you do is then you take your Apple Watch app and package that as an app extension within the app. Like I said, all communication is done through Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So any communication between the phone and the watch has to be done through that. Without that connection, there is no communication between the phone and the watch. The thing to remember is the Apple Watch API and the Apple Watch in general is a small, young product with low power. And that is one of the key parts of developing for a watch, is they want to make sure that this is a first version product and they don't want you to kill the battery. So if you see limitation in the API, that's where it comes from.
Jimmy,
for sales of the watch. No, sorry. So there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the UI, how to construct a UI for the Apple Watch, and then we're going to talk about communication between the watch and the phone. There are three interfaces that you can build for an Apple Watch app. The main application, and then two specialized ones, a glance and a notification UI. The main app is going to be pretty familiar. You're going to be pretty familiar with it if you've already developed for the iPhone and use storyboards and things like that. However, you're limited to either creating a hierarchical UI, which is kind of what most of us are used to, where you have you click on a table cell, it takes you to the next menu. You click on another table cell, it takes you to the next menu, things like that. But you can also do a page-based navigation, where you scroll to the left or to the right, and you have a series of pages with different UIs that you can then interface with. You have the choice between the one or the other. You can't really mix them together. Apple's main objective with building the app UI is don't kill the battery and make sure your app runs the right way. So things like animation is definitely discouraged. You're not going to build the latest video game on an Apple Watch. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen in 2015. However, there are some tricks and some image caching that you can do to maybe do games, but not stuff with real good animation. Apple doesn't allow subclassing and customization of controls. So just as if you're familiar with the Apple API and UI kit, you can take a control, you can override it, and start overriding methods and making it a little bit more different. Now, you can't do that on the Apple Watch. They pretty much, you take the control and use it as it is. There's certain settings you can set, but no actual getting into the code and subclassing stuff. Next, let's talk about glances. So the way glance works is there's the main glance, pulling up the watch, right? But I can also scroll up, and it will then bring up a series of user interfaces of different glances that different apps give you. So there's some built-in ones, the player for playing music, the map, the weather, things like that. Well, you can add your own glance UI to the Apple Watch. Like I said, it's for displaying information quickly. So there's some limitations as far as what UI elements you can use. Tables, maps, interactive controls, animations, and any custom fonts are not going to be available to you if you develop a glance UI. Last, let's talk about one of the biggies, probably the one that's actually maybe more important, notifications. And that's where the real strength of the watch is being able to let you know what's going on. So you already have notifications in iOS, and you could still use those in the Apple Watch, and Apple does a decent job of bringing those into the watch, but Apple also allows some customability, especially for the watch. There are two main notifications, a short look and a long look. And the way the short look works is you have text, you have an image, and that's pretty much it. That's what you see to the left there. The right allows a more scrollable user interface with a variety of buttons that you can then tap on, and being able to do certain actions. The long look also has two different interfaces, a static interface and a dynamic interface. The idea being is the dynamic interface is the one where you run your code, you customize the UI, and the static interface acts as a fallback. If your code doesn't run within that certain time that Apple decides if your interface needs to come up, it's going to run your static interface, and you're just going to have to deal with it. So that's something to keep in mind. The way the dynamic interface works is there's an API call. You're going to override a class called User Notification Interface Controller, and you either, if it's a remote notification, you run the did receive remote notification. If it's a local notification, you run did receive local notification, and then do whatever customization to the UI you need to do. Communication between the watch and the phone. One way of sharing data between the phone and the watch is using app groups, which have been around for quite some time. So if you've done app extensions, you probably have seen app groups. So it's kind of a common place for different apps to write to and share data using one common directory. And so that gives you a great way to be able to share data between the phone and the watch. The second way is by directly communicating with the phone app. And there is a method called Open Parent application that you can call on using WatchKit. And then that then you want to override a method on the application called handle watch kit extension, which then takes the dictionary that's been sent, and then you call the callback to say when you're done. So that only allows you communication between the watch and the phone. You have to end up using app groups actually to communicate from the phone to the watch. So one thing I've noticed as a developer is how simulator support is, I would say, somewhere between fair and poor. If you're going to be testing stuff like glances and notifications, you really need to test it on an actual watch. Otherwise, the simulator just doesn't run quite, doesn't give you the full experience that you need. There's a lot of great existing tutorials on stuff like app extensions, app groups, and notifications, because that stuff's already been around. So that gives you a great leg up on developing for the Apple Watch. And lastly, there's a lot of great libraries out there to kind of abstract a lot of the communication stuff. One I've looked at is NM Wormhole, which provides a great way to use app groups, combination of app groups and notifications. So that way, if I want to communicate and share data between the phone and the watch, it's pretty easy for me to do and instantaneous. So now that I've owned the watch, what are my own personal observations? One thing that Apple introduced with Yosemite and iOS 8 is the idea of handoff. What it means is if you're on the same Wi-Fi network, I can take a phone call on my Mac, do regular SMS messaging on my Mac, I can surf on my phone and go back to that website on my computer, I can look up something on the iPad, pull up my phone, handoff. I'm handing off whatever work I'm doing to another Apple device, which is really great and convenient. However, the problem is UI designers who don't know how to design for the Apple Watch say, kind of, screw it, let's just make the person use their iPhone. So you'll be using an app on your Apple Watch, and all of a sudden it says, oh, you want to finish what you're doing? Go to your phone to finish it up. It's really annoying, and I think people just haven't figured out quite yet how to really utilize the Apple Watch UI when they want to be able to do certain tasks. And so handoff kind of ends up being this fallback excuse when they don't know how to do it on the watch. App loading speed can be said sometimes pretty miserable. And for a watch, that kind of sucks because you're loading an app on your watch. You don't want to have to wait and look at it. It gets so bad sometimes you'll be loading an app and the watch goes blank because it's that certain time of inactivity where the display goes off. And then you'll go back to your display and you'll notice it's still loading the app. I think as part of that is people haven't had watches for haven't had enough time to really develop on a watch, and like I said, simulator support isn't that great. So I don't think that support has been out there to develop and know what the true loading speed on a watch actually is. I haven't gotten a great ability to use Wi-Fi. So the idea would be is that I can keep my phone and my watch in 2 different rooms in my house, and they'd be connected to the same Wi-Fi network. That way I can use the watch and phone at longer distances without having to depend on Bluetooth. I've had some flaky issues with that, and there's been a lot of people online who have had the same complaints where certain Wi-Fi networks are just don't quite click with both the phone and the watch. Like I said, display resolution on the watch is amazing. It almost kind of seems ridiculous when they keep upping they come out with Retina, they come out with 4X, they come out with like better and better resolution. How good can you get? But there's something about having such a great resolution on the watch and being able to read text so clearly and so easily. And that's one thing I've noticed with this watch is at such a small screen, that resolution, they really take advantage of that and allow make it easy for you to read and to use. Force Touch is a great UI. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But it's definitely something that's useful and you get used to. So the camera app, the watch does not have a camera on here. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you have your watch and your phone obviously hooked up, and I can get a real-time look at my phone's camera through my watch and take a picture using the watch. Now, for something for a device where Apple's trying to discourage people from doing animation and things like that, the video to me looks pretty darn good on the Apple Watch when I'm taking a picture with the watch. So that's something where, yeah, communication with the phone really works out really well, because when I have to do that family photo, it'll be nice for someone else to hold the camera to me when taking the picture with my watch. Last but not least is Siri, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So Rich sort of touched on this, but kind of the idea of no interface. It's a term I've seen a lot lately. The idea is we're not tied to a big screen in order to do all our work, which is what we're used to for the last 40 years or so. We have touch, we have a mouse, we have a keyboard, where there's almost some big screen that we're interacting with and having to stare at all day. The idea behind no interface is not being tied to that, but being tied to sort of ubiquity of technology and being able to interact with it without being dependent on the large screen. And there's three great ways where the Apple Watch does this. And like I said, one of the biggest things that I've seen, and it kind of surprised me, is how big a part of that puzzle Siri is. Siri just makes it so much easier to interact and do stuff. I've been using Siri much more since I've had this watch. Siri is the idea I can talk to my watch and it will do things for me. Stuff like speech to text is amazing. Apps like Amazon, if I want to search for a product, or Evernote, if I want to take notes, it does a fantastic job just being able to talk to it. If I want to send a text message, just say text so-and-so, and I've had really great results. Brand names it sometimes has a hard time with, but for the most part, it's pretty darn good at being able to take what I say and make it into text and do something with it. I don't need a keyboard, I don't need a little type pad. I can just do it right off the watch using my voice. One thing I haven't touched on is the Taptic engine. This device has a little thing on the back that'll tap my wrist whenever it wants to notify me. I mean, as much as we all enjoy listening to people's different phone rings, whatever great pop song they have set up on their phone, and interrupting a speech. Thank you, by the way, for putting your phones on vibrate. But this is what's great, is that I can shut off my ringer. Honestly, I've seen a lot of people suggest, just shut off your ringer. You don't need it anymore. You have your watch. Why not just use your watch and have it tap the wrist? And that's good. It's just as good as having a phone ring. So this is another way it integrates into our lives, rather than being this blaring phone ring and this blaring screen that we have to stare at. Lastly is Force Touch. So Force Touch is really great at giving you the ability to use gestures and giving you that right click, that context menu that you need when you're using an app. And I found it very useful. And now I know what it's used for, so I can go into an app and I know the pattern of what Force Touch is supposed to do. So what are the opportunities? Obviously time-based. Now, don't create a clock app, please, because Apple has already said if you create a clock app, they will reject it. But if it's timer, it's a stopwatch, anything time-based that's not strictly just a clock clone, this is a great place to build an app. One app that I have is a TikTok Talk. It's a speech timing app that tells me how many minutes I've left in a public speaking event like this. And that's a perfect example of something that I want to tap me on the wrist and let me know when I'm running out of time, things like that. Health, I think we've covered this. If it's health-based, the watch has a lot of great sensors. Apple hopefully is going to open that up even more. But using the watch and HealthKit and being able to share that data, the watch is going to be a great place for that. And lastly, most importantly, communication. If it's something that involves quick responses, so like text messaging, you can pull up a list of quick responses. It does a great job parsing different text messages, so like if you have an or statement, it'll know your answer is going to be either A or B, whatever that person had asked you in that question. If it's speech to text, communication is another great platform. The watch is another great platform for that if you can take advantage of speech to text. So if you're interested, please contact me. I can help you out if you have any ideas for your own business or for your own tech community, what the Apple Watch can do for you. Reach out to me and we can talk. I have my contact info here. So please get a hold of me. Thank you so much for listening and have a great night.